What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me today as always. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share because there's plenty more content on the way, including several new firearms I'm very excited to share with you guys, as well as continuing the series of If I Could Only Have One. And that's what brings us to this video today. I've been spending a lot of time with full-size and compact firearms and to some degree subcompact firearms with the HK VP9 SK. But it's been a while since I've really visited the single stack firearms. In fact, the last time I really did it was not only the Walther PPS M2, but even going all the way back to the beginning of the channel and comparing the Glock 43 to the Shield 9mm by Smith & Wesson. And I walked away saying that the Glock 43 was just a tiny bit better, although I like the Shield a lot as well. It's a fantastic firearm. But for the sake of this type of series, I want to walk away with a winner. Now, that being said, for today's comparison, once again, both of these firearms are fantastic. You can't go wrong with either one, but I want to walk away with a winner. So I did have some preconceived notions a little bit about this video. I sort of had a winner in mind, and in a moment of transparency, I was wrong. I will just tell you, the winner that I thought was going to be the champ for today ended up not being. So I'm excited to share that with you. And of course, this type of series, I'm going to be taking a look, not a deep dive into each gun, but just some basic things, some basic stats and features, some shooting along the way. We'll take a look at the triggers and the ergonomics, and there will be a winner. So let's go ahead and jump into this. Now, if you've had any experience with either of these firearms, you'll probably already know that there are not a lot of differences between the two. And of course, before we get started, both of these firearms are unloaded and will remain so throughout the entire video. I do have an unloaded magazine in each one just for the sake of the video, but again, unloaded. So, from a stats standpoint, both of these firearms are going to fall from a length standpoint right around 6.3 inches, give or take just a fraction, but very close. From a height standpoint, both standing about 4 1/4 or just a little over 4 1/4 inches. In terms of width, both of these firearms are going to be roughly 1 inch, the PPS being just a hair wider than that, but barely. From a barrel standpoint, both are going to be roughly 3 1/4, just over 3 1/4 inches. So from those stats, these firearms are very similar. The only big difference between the two is weight. Now, if you're a Glock fan or have any experience with Glocks, you'll know that by and large, Glocks are well known for being notoriously light, and that's the case here with the 43 as well. The 43 is going to come in at roughly 18 ounces or so, just a tiny bit less than that, versus 21 ounces on the PPS. So there is a little bit of weight there. Now, of course, you could make the argument that a little bit more weight is going to make the firearm a little bit easier to shoot, and that could be very true. I'm kind of a believer of that. However, less weight means it's a little bit easier to carry and conceal. So you're kind of trading one for the other, of course. Now, in terms of features, both of these firearms have very similar features by and large. Both of these are going to have non-ambidextrous slide releases or slide locks on them. Both of them are going to have, of course, magazine releases, but the 43 has an ambidextrous magazine release. You do have to switch it yourself, but you can do that. Now, according to Walther's website, this is not ambidextrous, or at least they don't advertise it as such. I've never played around to try and switch it out. Perhaps you can. If you know if this is ambidextrous, be sure to leave a comment in that, because my research did not come up with that stat. So, in terms of takedown, both of these guns are identical in takedown. They do both have the takedown tabs that you have to actuate on both sides of the firearm. You do have to pull the trigger, and then you're able to pull the slide off. Once again, this is not a deep dive, so I'm not going to be taking the firearms apart. Be sure to check out the other videos for that. Neither one of these have accessory rails for lights, lasers, grenade launchers, anything like that. So from a stats or a feature standpoint rather, they're basically the same. However, there are certainly going to be some differences. Now, the Glock does not have forward slide serrations on it, only has back slide serrations. I will say, however, if you compare this to the Glock 42, the 42 slide serrations in back are extremely subtle. In fact, they're almost a little bit hard to articulate. However, the 43, they did a very good job of making sure that the slide cuts were deep enough you could really get a hand on it and function that slide. There are not forward slide serrations. However, once again, I think there's just enough texture there. The slide is just rough enough to be able to go ahead and do that. So, although it doesn't have it, you can still perform that function. Whereas the PS or PPS M2, it does have forward slide serrations and back slide serrations, and they are very grippy, which is nice. So you can definitely do your press checks or anything like that if you need to. Now, when we talk about the grips of these firearms, here's where things get just a little bit different. Now, this Glock 43, this was this was actually a new firearm, and it was also a used firearm. Maybe I'll share that story someday down the road. But when I got this back, it did have a Talon grip on it. I believe I put that on there at one time or another, and I did that for a reason. And of course, I took it back off for this video. You'll notice that there is some texture on the grip of the Glock 43, both on the sides and the front and back straps. However, it's pretty subtle. Now, they built this on the Gen 4 frame, or Gen 4 philosophy, if you will. However, the texture on this, and I've always said I like the Gen 4 texture, this is a little bit more subdued. So I would say that this is a little bit more slick. However, they did include the Gen 4 magazine release rather than the Gen 3, so that part is really good. But from a texture standpoint, I think they could have stood to made this a little bit more rough or a little bit more articulated. However, you can certainly still get a grip on it and make it work. Now, I do prefer, once again, Talon grips or some sort of grip tape to just aid in that a little bit. Whereas on the Walther PPS M2, this is going to share the same grip or ergonomic philosophy as maybe the PPQ or the Q5 match, something like that, where they've incorporated these squigglies that are well known not only on Walther but also on some of the HK pistols as well. These tiny little kind of banana-shaped squigglies, that sort of thing, and they carry it all the way around the grip. And then they also do have some very subtle finger grooves, but articulated enough to where you can definitely tell that they're there, and they really lock your fingers in with that grip. And then there are also some very subtle protrusions, if you will, on the grip, once again, to give just a little bit more beef to that grip right there. So from an ergonomic standpoint, from a grip standpoint, I do have to give a leg up to the Walther PPS M2. And that, you know, carries with some of the other Walther firearms as well. I think they pay a lot of attention to that. So kind of cool there. From a sight setup. Now, the Walther PPS M2 is the LE version, so that came with a 3-dot glowy sight setup. So these actually gather a little bit of light in the room, outside, whatever, and they glow for a period of time. You know, they're fine, and at the range they're fantastic, but from a carry standpoint, I don't think they serve much of a purpose because they're not gathering any light, especially if you're wearing inside the waistband or something like that. Now, the Glock out of the box would come with the standard field goal type sight. However, you'll notice that these are actually HD Trijicon night sights. So these have been upgraded, and I definitely encourage people who buy Glock firearms to go ahead and switch those sights out from those field goal polymer sights to something steel, perhaps something night sight as well, since you're going to go ahead and do it anyway. From a magazine standpoint, here's where we also get just a little bit different in terms of philosophy. Now, both of these do have the flat magazine in them, and both flat magazines are a 6-round capacity, so you're not giving or taking any rounds choosing either one of these firearms. However, where things get just a little bit different, the Walther PPS M2, if you go with just the standard firearm, not the LE, you're going to get a +1, so it's going to make it a 7-round magazine for your extra round, your extra magazine, and it also does extend that pinky grip, which is really nice. The LE model will actually include one more magazine, and it's an 8-round magazine, and it extends that grip just a little bit further. So, and extending that ergonomic philosophy as well. I like that quite a bit. Whether it's the LE model or the regular model, having that one extra round and continuing that ergonomic philosophy is really nice. The Glock, however, it's a little bit different. It has, again, the flat 6-round magazine, but the other magazine in the box is actually a 6-round magazine as well. I don't have that particular magazine with me. It would have just a pinky extension, but not a +1. So a lot of people, including the person that I bought this from, added Terran Tactical base plates. This is a +3. In fact, he did 2 of them like that. And that extends the grip, which is really nice. And it also extends that magazine capacity as well. But you have to do that aftermarket and spend the money. Now, I know those Terran base plates are really nice, but they're kind of expensive. So you're looking between $30 and $40 for one of those right there. So I would have to give the edge a little bit to the PPS M2 from a magazine standpoint. Now, before we get to triggers, let's go ahead and take a look at a little bit of shooting at the range and see how these guns did. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that footage at the range. So both of these guns were really fun shooters that particular day. I do have to give the leg up a little bit to the Walther PPS M2, at least on that day, and I attribute a lot of that to not only the ergonomics, it kind of molds into my hand very nicely, but it also weighs 3 ounces more. So between those two things, this gun, for whatever reason, for me, just shoots a little bit better. And then the sights on the range are fantastic too. However, the aftermarket sights, these Trichicon HDs, are fantastic on the Glock. Sometime I might look into something like that for the PPS M2. Time will tell. But again, shooting on that day, the PPS just did a little bit better. Now, from a trigger standpoint, I must say that the triggers on both of these firearms are very similar to each other. I weighed both of them off camera, and the PPS came in on average around 5.5 pounds, or just a little bit over that. But when we look at the trigger here, we've got a little bit of uptake, and there is certainly some resistance, but it's not too bad at all. It's a very smooth trigger, and once we get to our wall, there's our break, and it's a nice, consistent, clean, audible break. And then from a reset standpoint, there is a reset there. However, it's pretty subtle. It is a little bit audible, and you can feel it, but not by a whole lot. So the reset on this definitely stands to use a little bit of improvement, at least in my opinion. However, again, overall, there's our uptake and our wall and our break. One more time on that reset. There's that reset there. It is there, but it's pretty subtle. That said, it's not bad at all, and again, for its intended purpose, it does just fine. Now the Glock 43, and again, this is a bone stock trigger, no connectors or anything like that, and when I weighed it, it came closer to 5 pounds, which was actually a little bit surprising. I thought it would have come into the 5.5 or 6 pound mark, because oftentimes Glocks, when they start out from the factory, when you open them up, they're great triggers, but they're a little bit more stout. Not the case with this one. Now, this may have a little bit more mileage through it, and that's why it's softened up and smoothed out a little bit. So when we look at the trigger, we do have, again, uptake, and once again, it's reasonably smooth and a little bit shorter distance than the Walther, but not by much. But then we get to our wall, and there's our break, and it is very audible. It's very crisp. And then our reset, and there's our reset. And I have always liked Glock resets. I think people really tout that Glocks have fantastic resets, and I would agree with that. So we'll start over and do this one more time. There's our uptake, just a little bit of distance, a few millimeters. There's our break. And there's our reset. Again, it's a pretty standard Glock trigger, although it's reasonably smooth, a little bit more smooth than you might find right out of the box. But by and large, both of these guns are great, especially for their intended purpose, up close and personal at self-defense ranges. So this is an if I could only have one video, so of course there has to be a winner, and I have to tell you it was tough, and I said in the beginning of this video that I had a preconceived notion about which gun was going to come out on top, and I'll just admit it, I thought the Glock 43 was actually going to win. Really because I've spent more time behind Glocks than the Walther or Walthers in general, and I always feel pretty at home when I shoot Glock firearms, whatever it happens to be, whether it's a 34 or a 42. You could run the gamut. I just like them all. However, I will say, and I was wrong on my preconceived notion, I actually found that the PPS M2 was the winner. And there are a couple of reasons why. One of the biggest reasons is going to be the ergonomics. It's tough to beat the ergonomics on such a small firearm for the PPS M2. It really just fits very nicely in the hand, and there's enough texture here to really keep enough of a grip. I mean, it could be a little bit better, but it's still good, and I would say it's just marginally better than the Glock 43. But with those slight finger grooves, it just works out really well. And for a couple of more ounces, it makes for a slightly more controllable shooter than the Glock 43, at least for me, and at least on that day. And I would say, by and large, that's true for me. Now, I'd like to eventually upgrade these sights. However, these sights certainly do pretty well, at least on the range. So, if I could only have one, Today, it would happen to be the Walther PPS M2. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about this, what your thoughts are, what your experiences are. If you agree or disagree, I'm always excited to read everybody's comments. And otherwise, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next time. Be sure to join us on Wednesday nights. Myself, Big Johnson, and 1776. The links are below, of course. We get together and chat about firearms of various sorts and goings-on in the firearm universe. So we're looking forward to seeing you there. And otherwise, I will see you next time. Thanks.